Okay, so welcome everyone. Apologies for the delayed start, but it's time for the July 2024 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. So looks like we've got quite a few people joining. So thank you everyone for joining. So while Ben and Stephen are wandering around downstairs looking for some pizza, or I guess the pizza won't be here yet, but we've got a few more people who are turning up. So we'll just sort of have a few people popping in and out at the beginning. So apologies if that's watching the screen is a bit distracting. But one of the things you can do in Teams is turn off incoming video, and that way you don't have to see people's faces. And I have one complaint about that Teams feature, is that it's not sticky. I just want to turn it on and have it stay on forever. Like I don't. Exactly. Different people work different ways, and some of that stuff can get quite distracting. Okay, so just a quick introduction on my side. My name's Mark O'Shea. So welcome everyone. As I mentioned, Ben and Steve are downstairs. Aresh isn't in the room with us today, but I'm pretty confident he's in chat. So welcome, Aresh. And one of the other organisers who's based in the Netherlands actually had to do some work this morning, so he couldn't actually make it for today's session. So just a couple of things, like what we'll sort of go through here is just for those of you who haven't attended previously, just to do some quick introductions, just if you feel like sort of just either unmuting to let us know who you are, why you're here, what you're interested in. Or alternatively, if you prefer just to drop it into chat, either approach is good with us. Then we'll talk about an event, and we have the event organizer. See, I've finally gotten more efficient with this opening slide, and I finally put event in brackets.
That's better. It works for both.
So yeah, it works for both. There's always one, but sometimes there's more. Then hopefully Ben's back in time to kick off his session on Web Account Manager and Passwordless in Windows 11. Then we've got something that it's not strictly structured, and I've just kind of put in a bit of a placeholder name for it, Versus, which is kind of tying into something we've seen at a few different events we've been at recently, where there always ends up being a bit of a discussion about, where in Intune should I do the following? Because depending on when you first started working with Intune or who taught you how to use Intune, you may have a completely different way of.
Even today, depends who you ask.
Yeah. So basically, not to necessarily say the way that you may be doing it is terrible, but maybe to say that, to be more supportive of other options. And sometimes this kind of gets into, conversations around, does that mean you should go back and refactor your entire tenant to, catch up with modern approaches? And my response to that is good luck. The reality is that it's just anything new that you're doing, going, okay, what are the ways we can do this better with the new tools or the new methods we've got? And for those of you who, don't just work in one tenant that's well established. So, those of you who work for partners who are either adopting new environments or creating new environments for customers. Obviously, a lot of these new best practices are things you can take straight into those environments. But eventually, that there'll be other ways of doing things that will make any of those recommendations come through. So, so that one will just sort of be a bit of an open conversation. We won't try to address everything. I think this could almost be a section that we cover every month and just pick a topic to throw into that old versus new, what you should be looking at. And then the final piece, general discussion, is just generally where, like, after we've finished the official part of the content, once we get into general discussion, that's just where we stop the recording at that section, because sometimes we know people may have questions or comments that they don't necessarily want being recorded for future posterity's sake. So we want to make sure that if you've got something that maybe is a bit sensitive as far as your work, your role goes or something like that, we don't want that to end up in a recording. So if there's anything that you sort of you're wanting to ask, but maybe you think it's a little bit too sensitive, just save it for the general discussion piece, and we can definitely cover it off there. Okay, so I can already see that there's a few people jumping into chat to do introductions. So Emmanuel, we've got Sven, and if anyone does want to jump in and actually, I think, where did I have it? Oh, there, introductions. So if anyone does want to unmute to just do a quick intro, but otherwise, if you've already dropped it into chat, that's fine. Anyone in the room who is
Sure.
their first time? Yeah. Can I?
Hi,
Hi.
Sven.
I already introduced myself via the chat, but of course I can redo it via voice, via video and audio, of course. I'm from the Netherlands. I actually was browsing Twitter, just waking up sort of, and I saw the tweets from Jeroen about this event. I was seen this multiple times, or never had the actual time and the opportunity to join up. And this time I had, and I was like, yeah, that's
Excellent.
so. And yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Don't feel pressured.
Yeah, no pressure.
Don't feel
That's
pressured.
I think I want to say this is probably my first endpoint management event, period. I'm Tom. I work with Jose over at Devicey. Background in FedGov, endpoint security, lot of security stuff, and more recently getting that into Intune and Azure as such. And I do a lot with graph and automation and multi-tenant shenanigans. It's a good time.
So is it fair to say that you can probably be a little bit more creative outside of your FedGov role?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of FedGov is finding creative solutions that can work in constrained environments. We get to see all the sharp edges in Intune, and it's a good time.
I'm Ken, my first event of this kind as well. I heard about it through Mitch. We used to work together at another MSP. I now work in-house doing end user support, but and it's a finance company. Well, trying to just
On the right path.
They're only like we're just co-managed, and I've just moved them all from GPOs to config profiles. But Intune's like 2 years away. Like it's so slow moving. We're global as well, so yeah, we're small in Australia versus the rest of the world. But no, very excited to be here doing this. I do try and move into Intune. I've done MSP work around it, but Mitch was really my intro to most of it a couple of years ago. So yeah, keen.
Awesome. So my name is Mitch. I work for a MSP in Australia called The Missing Link. I've been there for a couple of years now. I've been doing Intune probably since about 2018 or 2019, around the time that Win32 support came in with the sidecar. That was when it really started to become a viable solution versus something like SCCM where you still needed Win32. I also am now a community contributor to PS App Deploy Toolkit. I've been working with those guys for about 3 months as well. So I'm doing some stuff with that, and I'm working on the version 4.0 stuff we're hoping to release this year. So
you may have some opinions on some of the suggested topics I've got in that versus.
yeah.
Just saying, like I didn't set you up for it.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's coming.
Yeah, it'll be obvious when you see what's in there. You'll go, yeah, I think they may be the things that are going to be thrown in my direction.
So easy. Came from man. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm senior business and analyst. I work in the state governments.
Okay.
I'm hoping to understand more what's the best practice, what's the latest in terms of Intunes, Azure. It will help me with my projects. I've got a few integration projects and all these new things, Federated Logon and Octas and all that. It's quite new. I'm hoping to pick up something from here.
Oh, excellent. Thanks.
And
oh no,
we need introductions.
no, you've been before.
Yeah, I might as well.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I'm from a telecom company. Let's say that. And a colourful one. Been working with Intune for a number of years.
Okay. So So I think this is probably the first, like probably the biggest group of fresh
In person.
attendees that we've had in a while. So thank you everyone for turning up.
The wonders of free pizza, eh?
So I think Ben also kind of twisted your arm to come along.
Chris, my arm, I actually didn't know about it at all until he mentioned it. Otherwise, I probably would have been interested a while ago. I mean, I'm just up at our time. And
Yeah, so you've got
See,
like,
Mark, that's the problem. Like and I have the same problem. We're gonna get to a second, but like, how do we find people that are interested in that but just don't know about it? There's a bunch of people that just don't come because they don't know about it.
100%.
and that's probably even, yeah, so probably even here because I think, if we can sort of talk about your event now. So Jose, do you want to jump into this and then I'll jump back in. So if Ben's not here, I've got a little thing I can talk about prior to Ben kicking off.
Yeah.
So if you want to jump in, I don't know if you're allowed to, sorry to interrupt, I don't know if you're allowed to announce the reason why it's being held this early yet.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
So, that's 27th of August.
Can you tell I just reused an old? Let me
Yeah,
fix that.
So,
Sorry.
for the ones that don't know, I'm the organizer. I own the brand Workplace Ninja in Australia. And we ran last year 3 events in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. And then this year we've already run the Sydney and Melbourne, I would say. But then I got a message the other day from the godfather of Windows 365, Christian Brinkhoff, that he's going to be coming to Australia. And he said, look, it would be cool if we could organize something. So we just put up an event because I think it's too much of an important thing that he is coming here and is willing to do a talk, that we're not going to put an event. So we put up an event and we're going to be hosting Christian. It's going to be our first official international speaker. So most of the people here come from some place. He's coming. He does not live in Australia, so it's I think it's based in Redmond, right?
Let me just do a reload. Yeah. So as far as I know, he's Redmond based.
Yeah. So he's gonna be coming on. He's gonna be doing a session on Windows 365, but it's one of his brainchilds. Actually, we're gonna be putting some more stuff. Dawn is probably going to be doing another session. I'm going to be doing a session. We still organizing because it's like, it did not give me much time to play with because I said I'm going to be here in a month and a half. What can you get done? So I said, look, live with me and I will do it. But like, yeah, I think we always try to talk. Most of the topics are about workplace management. We have different topics every single location that we go through in different things. And we try to talk all topics. We have Arash. That is normally our official Windows 365 guy. So we always try to deliver a session on 365 or I always try to.
Thank you.
We always try to deliver a session on like Intune Suite, new technologies, Intune Core, as we call it. Like I did some sessions on Mac OS and some sessions on application control. There's always things like we try to be really open with the topics. For now, we're trying to keep the topics more around workplace management, or modern workplace or cloud native, whatever people call it nowadays. But we're pretty open, like anything Microsoft stuff, we're pretty open. So if we can get some people that are really, really willing to talk about identity security, I think that's probably things we consider as well. That's it. We're going to have we're going to be hosting the next event on 27th of August in this very own office. It's a full day event. We're going to have five full sessions. Then we're planning to have an AMA with the speakers afterwards. So we sit down for 1 hour over beers and we take topics on demand, whatever, to the best of our knowledge of what we can answer. And then everyone is invited. It's a free event. We're trying to cap to 100 people. So yep, just feel free. Just I think Mark has the link in there. Just join us. Like we have events all try to make all across Australia. Depending on how things go, I might try to go twice on each state. Like that's still to be planned, but like, and I'm also planning another event probably later in this year in Canberra, which Tom is from.
So yeah, you'll have a different audience in Canberra.
Yeah.
But considering the number of federal government agencies, etc., that have got appropriate licenses for this stuff, and not necessarily an appropriate skill base there yet for it. Yeah, I'd say demand would be outstripping supply.
I hope.
Okay, so so just the thing that I'll talk about quickly before Ben gets here, hopefully Ben gets back in here soon, is Just in terms of the like the meetup / user group naming, is like one of the things that I've sort of wrestled with for a while is, do we rename it? And if so, what do we call it that doesn't
Workplace Ninja?
if it's something that could be, yeah. So that's the thing, is like we've got to sort of make it something that, because I don't think like the term modern management isn't really a term that's used as much now. It's kind of like a 5-year-old name that hasn't really kept on. So there are some that immediately seem like obvious rebrand opportunities. Like, why not just call it the Intune Meetup? And it's like, because that would alienate people who aren't interested in the Intune stuff, who would come along for when it's an identity or security or compliance session or whatever. So it is kind of hard to find an umbrella term that isn't.
That's going to drive a lot of people away, Kwok.
Yeah. We'll just
What about just?
I was going to say
5 best practices or something. I don't know.
Can we call it hybrid group?
we'll just call it SCCM.
Oh, yes.
Give it amendment.
Yeah. So yeah. So
Just go for like the bait tactic. Make people angry.
Yeah.
So they want to investigate a bit more.
So it's one of those things where so even for a few years now, it's something that I've sort of been thinking about. But it is like, if you sort of think about it, you sort of come up with things that you immediately think, oh, you could call it this. And then you think about it for a second and go, oh no, we can't. So even some of the things is like, originally like we were calling it like the Sydney whatever, but because COVID, surprise,
Became the online.
The online. Yeah, basically that opened us up a lot more to Australia and other countries. So if anyone does have any ideas of things that you think would be, let's sort of come up with a marketing brief. The client brief is must reflect that at its heart, it's Intune as a management tool, but also portrays the other surrounding Microsoft technologies that it exists and relies upon. So they come up with something. Or we could just call it
the cloud native group.
Intune and other stuff.
Yeah.
Or the Intunet of things. And then get told, please don't bastardize our product name like that.
Yeah, Paul.
No, Aresh, you know that you've had pushback on AI stuff from.
Oh yeah, so sorry, Mark, just to finish off. So again, sorry about the workplace ninja. I just forgot. Like, it's a free event. It's going to be a full day. We start at 9 a.m. We finish at 6 p.m. We have some nibbles and some stuff sponsored by my company that me and Tom work for, Devicey. So we're just going to be sponsoring some snacks and some beers at the AMA and stuff. So free event. In-person event only. We unfortunately do not stream because we want to get people actually really here networking and stuff. So for people that live in other states, hopefully we can make to a state this year, next year. But like we try now to make it a stream online event, because some people that are from Sydney, they will not come if they will just watch it the whole day. And then we're trying to get more people. We are trying to get the beauty of networking in person back on again. So
I just came up with an idea.
yes,
Success.
Workplace samurai.
yeah.
Yeah, but so I can see, but you can sort of see here where that, you sort of come up with a name and all of a sudden it's, we can't quite do that. So, so if anyone has any ideas, and definitely something we can spend a bit of looking at.
Steve and Mark and Ben in a ranch shop.
There's also Eddie. There's no shortage of characters that we could come on with that one. Give it some official mascot.
Yeah. Oh, even better.
Okay. So now we're going to hand over to Ben, but I think Ben probably needs to get his head together.
Please give me a small amount of time. So, overseas.
Okay, so probably just some other things. And while Ben is setting up, just some other things then is in terms of days, like preferred days of the week to do it. So Does anyone have a strong preference on a day other than, I guess if you're in Sydney, other than a Wednesday, Australia? Does anyone have a strong preference to move it? Well, I guess the people who've got a strong preference to move it probably wouldn't be here. Because they couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Watching the recording.
So I think it's, so I think generally you don't want to do it on a Monday or a Friday. Thursdays, people don't like Thursdays because I think for some it's still late night shopping.
Well, and so
In-
let's go out. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that basically just
Sunday's okay.
yeah. So it really only leaves Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Way. So I don't know if there's much of a difference either way.
I don't think so. I think Wednesday, generally being the hump day, I think maybe Tuesday might be easier to coach people into doing things because, the weight of the week is not hit them now.
Yeah,
Um,
they're only one day behind on that week's work.
Right.
on a
Yeah,
Tuesday.
use a serviette as
I'm just gonna wing it.
Plates in the third bottom drawer. It says plates, and they're just paper plates. Oh, we have a hand up.
Okay.
how am I connecting my thing?
Yes.
I don't know whether.
So I'll see it. So I'll stop sharing. So I'll just switch over because I've only got one slide here for Ben.
Yeah.
And I think Ben is now taking over.
Hey, nice. Okay, just wait until everyone's got a slice of pizza. So I know that this user group's primarily around administrating, being admins and all that sort of stuff. But today I'm going to tell everyone that you're all a developer, and I'm only half lying. So one of the big things that I've been sort of dealing with and talking about over the last sort of couple of years is whenever we write basic automation things like PowerShell scripts or whatever, if you're doing that on a regular basis, then half your job is now product development or solutions development. And one of the biggest problems that comes with that is how to use safely and securely store credentials to do things in the cloud. There's a bunch of different solutions, but for every solution, there's an equal and more painful way to stuff it up and store that secret somewhere and put it into GitHub. One of the most common ones, because obviously we're talking about Microsoft-y stuff today. One of the more common ones is building things like Azure Functions or basic small little utilities that you put into the cloud. You build an app registration for that. You put in a client secret. You put that in your code, you save it, it works, everyone's great, you get a big high five, and then you submit that to GitHub, and now that secret is in the world and everyone can do whatever they want with it. This is a thing that doesn't just affect full-time devs, this affects admins who are just doing little tools to help their day job. It affects everyone. So there's a bunch of technologies that exist in the Microsoft world and just in general that will help us do the things we need to do anyway, but also mitigate having to accidentally keep those credentials written down, basically, is the primary thing. So I'm not really prepared. I've done this session a couple of times around the world, but I'm not going to do it super as in-depth as before. I did just restart my computer because Steve wanted me to, not my computer, it's a Windows 11 kiosk device. So I don't know whether it'll work, but we're going to give it a go. So there's a couple of different technologies that exist, and one of the big things that I've been doing over the last couple of years has been talking about what's new with authentication. I assume everyone in this session at least has a basic understanding of what MSAL is, or the Microsoft Authentication Library. Yep. Looking at the chat to see. Silence is a good thing. Okay. So I keep talking about this stuff, thinking that eventually there's going to be nothing new to talk about. And I keep bringing out new things, and I keep having to talk about it. So one of the big things that's been brought up recently is two things. One is this concept called OpenID Connect, or OIDC. OIDC is a technology that essentially allows disparate services on the internet that have their own identity to be linked so that you don't actually have to create credentials in one service so that the other service can talk to it. It's an amazing solution that essentially the demo that I've got that I can try and get working. What is it? dev.azure.com. Not connected to the internet. That might help. We're off to a good start.
Demo, man.
Thank you. I try
Yeah.
so hard. So yeah, OIDC, one of the demos that I've got is just connecting into Azure DevOps, which technically is not part of Azure. It's its own service that has its own identity. And one of the more common things that you need to do in Azure DevOps is when you're running a pipeline. Let me see, I need to sign out and log in with a different account. My favorite thing about doing an auth session is fighting auth constantly. But yeah, so like one of the common things that you do in here is you see this one. Don't ask me for my password. This is why you don't do things on Steve's laptops.
Hey, you didn't want to come bring a laptop with you.
I brought a laptop. It's just not correct.
No wonder you can't bet when.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to really quickly do this OIDC demo because I think it's kind of cool.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Password is 1, 2, 3.
It is actually. Did I get it right? Wow.
Evidently, yes.
Evidently, yes. Okay. So one of the common things that you need to do is when you are building a pipeline that will run to either build a piece of code, or if you're doing infrastructure as code and you're using ADO to sort of do those building things that I've spoken about previously. How do you actually connect into Azure? So the most common way that we have seen in the past was creating service connections with ADO. Just let me in. The problem with that is that when you create a service connection, it simply creates a service principal in Azure, authentication dance, with a client secret. The problem with the client secret is that client secret expires, which is annoying. But also the default solution should be, you should never really use client secrets. You should always use certificates because certificates are more secure, but people are scared of certificates, so they don't do it. This new OIDC stuff that exists now, I'm just going to go in. I'm not actually going to show you sort of how it's wired up, but I'll show you how you can play around with it today. So I've just got a repository that I did for PSConf. I'm still dealing with jet lag from that, so that's my life. Okay, so once you go into a project, we're just going to go into the options, and we're just going to go into service connections because we're still creating a service connection. It's just that how we actually authenticate to it is slightly different. So I've already got one created, but just as an example, we're just going to go ahead and go into new service connection. I might just make this a little bigger. Also, if anyone watching remotely has issues with seeing the thing, please let me know. Someone will throw pizza at me. So we're just going to go ahead, select new service connection. And in this scenario, and most scenarios when we're dealing with Azure, we're going to select Azure Resource Manager. Then we're going to go ahead and click next. Okay, now the important thing to see here is that this is actually a tiered way to create a service connection in Azure based on the recommendations from Microsoft. So note that Workload Identity Federation, which is OIDC, is at the top. Underneath that is a manual way to do it, which if you've never done this before, you don't know how to do it. So obviously that's not going to be a thing. But then underneath that, we've got our older style of service principal, which creates the secret. And then we have managed identity and then a published profile, which you should never be using published profiles. They're not good. We're not going to talk about those. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and create a workload identity federation and just show you how easy it is. We're just going to go in here. We're going to select the scope level. It's going to be on subscription. And we'll see how fast the internet is. If there's any problems, I'm sure someone can fix it for me.
Can we submit a ticket?
Yes. Come on. Okay. Not a sponsorship anymore. Sorry. All this delay in my MVP renewal means that my sponsorship just expired. So let's see how this goes. All right, so I've selected my subscription that I want to deploy the app registration to. You can choose a specific resource group. So if you want to lock this down so that the workload that you're doing is just for a specific resource, select this, and it will only allow you to actually do things in that resource group. So it's secure by default. I'm not, so I'm not going to select resource group. I'm going to give it a connection name. Sydney is fine. Okay, give it a description. And then we have an option down here to grant access permissions to all pipelines. Obviously, if you're building this in a project that has multiple repositories and you don't trust the people you work with, do not enable that because it essentially will allow people to simply add that pipeline to anything that they're doing and run it using that identity. If you don't enable this, the first time you run the pipeline, it will simply ask permission to allow that to happen. And if they did not create that, or they're not an admin in that organization, then they'll need to come to you, the person who created it, and ask for permission. So this is how you can create a lot of access to a thing, but lock it down so that people still need to ask permission. So we'll go ahead and we'll select save. This doesn't take long. As I said, it's just creating an app registration and then linking up those things with OIDC. Just give this a second.
So Ben, while that's going through,
Yes.
what's the requirement for the Azure object? Or why do I need an Azure subscription for this if I'm putting it into the identity object?
What is the requirement for?
So why do I need Azure if I'm using Entra ID or?
You're not. So you're not using. So when okay, that's a very good question. Thank you very much. It is using the identity that exists when in this example, when the pipeline runs. So when a pipeline runs, it has an identity because it's running either on an agent that is hosted ephemerally somewhere, or it's running in Azure. If it's running in Azure, you don't need this because you're already in your tenant and everything's all good. But if you're just using the free pipelines or the free giant asterisks pipelines or the agent runners that exist in ADO, you have an identity so that you can do things in ADO without having to authenticate to do those things. So all you're simply saying is, I trust this identity because it's a thing that I control, but I also want it to be able to do things in Azure for me, but I don't want to be able to pass passwords around. I just want to say, this is trusted, please do the thing. Okay, so once we've got this created, we go into our Sydney is fine service connection. And then if we just go into manage service principal, this will actually take us into our portal, and it'll probably make me do another auth dance because this is how we live.
Well, that's
Don't ask for a password.
open a second.
I restarted my computer. Stephen.
Yes, you should restart.
Yes. I'm a professional.
You don't want to have some memory leaks.
No memory leaks with what I wrap because it doesn't compile. All right. So this is our app registration. Another thing to note, this name is terrible. This is an automatic generated one. It is the ADO tenant that you've created, the project that you're in, and then the GUID of either your tenant ID or just the service principal. So my strongest recommendation, the first thing that you do when you go in here is just to go into branding, change the name, because if you are in a large organization and you're doing a lot of this stuff, every single time you create a service connection in the same project, it always ends up with the same name. So after a while, if you don't rename this stuff, it gets confusing and you don't know what you're looking at. So
all I heard was emojis.
Okay, let's do it. Emojis. Yeah. All right, cool. We've given it a name. We're going to go ahead and save that. As far as what we need to do, you now need to make a decision as to what you want to do. If you want to do graphy things, you need to set the API permissions. But if you simply want access into Azure to do things with resources in there, you've already got the identity to do that. And you would simply just go and add this app registration using RBAC to any of those resources. And then you can just do those things. There are no permissions on this. I'm not going to show you how this works. I just want to show you how simple it is. But the important thing is to really look at like what makes this different than simply creating a client secret or a certificate. So we go into authentication. No, certificates and secrets. Why am I looking at the big screen and doing this? We have 3 tabs now. Previously, there was only 2, which was
Can we
certificates.
get that blade renamed, Steve, for certificates, secrets, and
Federated credentials?
credentials?
No, because I don't think that.
So you see the little box next to Ben's email address where it's got the little person with the little test,
Yeah.
put a request in
Okay, cool.
and ask them to rebrand it.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so I just want to point out that there are no certificates, there are no client secrets, there is just this one federated credential. And this is the OIDC sort of magic that makes this work. I'm going to try and make it a little bigger. There's not actually much to this. Essentially, any resource that supports OIDC can be used to do this thing. So, I'm showing a demo of ADO, but if you do pipeline stuff in GitHub, fully supports it. Basically, any modern environment that does compute stuff in the cloud by this point probably supports OIDC. So the primary thing you need to figure out is what is the issuer? So what is actually issuing out that token? So in this scenario, it's vstoken.dev.azure.com and then the tenant ID, and then what the subject identifier is, which is basically like the return URI or the redirect URI. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything else. We've got some description information, but this is automatically created for us so that we don't need to know how this works. But now we kind of do. So if I go into the pipeline, I'll just quickly show you what this looks like for one that I've already created previously. So again, this is a workload identity. I do not have any secrets. So even if someone got the app ID and my tenant details, they could not authenticate to this if they wanted to, because there's no way to do it outside of being in ADO. And if someone's got access to ADO, there's bigger problems. If someone's got access to my Azure tenant, there's bigger problems. But this mitigates me trying to work on something and accidentally putting a secret somewhere, which is the primary goal. So I'll just go ahead and run, and we'll watch. This is my favorite part of all pipeline work, watching logs.
It's like you came from a config manager.
It's like I came from config manager. So anyway, we'll let that run. I can have a little sip of my drink. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Is there a central list of supported tasks that support with and this OIDC federation?
In like for Azure stuff?
Yeah, for Azure stuff. There's a few we've hit that don't support it, and it's been tricky trying to keep track of which ones do it don't.
So any resources in Azure that allow you to do RBAC against a service principal will support this, because it simply provides an identity token.
Yeah.
That if you have the access to that resource, then you can do the thing. I have yet to run into anything, but if you can show me things that don't work, I would be very curious.
Yeah, I've got one. I think I can work around it by requesting, like doing the token exchange.
Oh, yeah.
Than
So that's another thing. That's a good point. So that's another thing to point out, that this gets you a token. If you have the correct rights in your organization and you have the correct API permissions, you can simply, just using things like, I don't know, like the AZ CLI tools or whatever, you can just say, okay, cool, but I want to change the resource. And that's how you would do this too. So in this example, so it's run. Let me show you actually what I did.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, nice. Excellent. Thank you. Who posted that?
I'm going to guess Quark.
If it was Quark,
Quark is always on the ball with these things.
excellent. It'd be cooler if you were here, but that's fine.
No, it was Emmanuel.
Nice.
So apologies.
Of course it was. Thank you, buddy. Okay, so just quickly looking at the logs here, I can see that I've got an identity, right? It's giving me a token for Azure Cloud. And if I scroll down here, I've just done a very basic graph call to get all the devices in my tenant. It's not a real world thing that you would actually do, but it just shows that the token that I have worked. But to do that, I needed to swap the token for a graph resource. So
you need to give access for you to query that resource.
that's correct. So I created an API permission for device read or whatever I did to show you really quickly how that works. So I've got the workload identity, but I then need to obviously run a thing to actually use that. And in this scenario, I'm using a task called Azure CLI. Azure CLI lets me run PowerShell in Azure with the identity that I want, which is the workload identity. So once I'm in there, I can then do whatever I want to do here. And in this scenario, I've gone get access token, and then I just changed the resource. But again, there's no password stored anywhere. So I think it's kind of neat. And anyone that spends time doing pipelines should absolutely play around with this and let me know if you run into problems. Okay, the other thing and the primary thing that I wanted to talk about was how we can actually authenticate doing interactive stuff on your computer and not keeping passwords in plain text in your little PowerShell scripts that you run on your computer.
With the certificate.
You did a great job. Okay, what I'm going to show you really quickly, because this is not the right audience to dive into how MSAL works in .NET, but I do just really want to quickly show you, because my favorite auth module, msal.ps, has been retired. I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out what is the most PowerShell-y way that I can actually just authenticate so that I can explain to people how simple it is, because there's a lot of different solutions out there to do authentication, things like nggraph, the AZ star modules, the AZ CLI tools, all of these tools have got their own abstraction layer that does authentication for you. But there's this concept that you're going to work with the resources the way that they think you're going to work with them. Whereas most of the time, I just want to figure it out myself. And that's why I want to know how to just get the token so I can do the work. I'm just going to bring this up really quickly. We're not going to run through it too much, but you need to get access to the Microsoft Identity Client library. There's about 3 or 4 different ways to do this. I will leave notes at the end of the user group to the repo that all this code's in, so that you can have a look at this and play around with it. But essentially, I just have a CS proj file with a couple of required libraries, NuGet libraries, and that just downloads the libraries for me so that I have them on my machine. I've got my client ID, my tenant ID, my scopes. This is a magic scope that essentially grabs any graph permission in my app registration and just gives me those scopes without having to specifically define them, which is kind of neat. And then we basically go ahead and we create an app client or a client app using the public client application builder. We create with an ID without authority, which is just, where are we actually authenticating to, default redirect URI, and then we build. And then we simply, once we've got that client created, we then run it. So we execute asynchronously. And because PowerShell doesn't do async super well, we break async and we wait for it and we get the result. These 3 lines are essentially all that we need to authenticate. And I've been talking about this at multiple conferences all over the world this year. My sort of hope is to try and lower the fear or the barrier to get into sort of authentication, because time and time again, I run into people who come up with really good ideas, but they get stuck because they haven't figured out how to do the auth dance. So, this is relatively easy. But for those who still don't think this is super easy, there is something that I've been working on that I'll show you. I'm just going to load this up and just show you what we know what an interactive auth looks like, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just going to load in all this stuff, because this is how we run PowerShell. Okay, so this is going to do an interactive specifically because it says acquire token interactive. It says what it's doing. It's quite amazing. This is going to bring up a browser. And then we get, the auth dance that I've already been doing over and over and over again, which is awful. Note that I'm using my used house salesman tenant. Thank you, Steve. Because this is the one that I'm logged in on my machine. If I hadn't been logged in on my browser, if I had opened up like a in private browser, it would ask me for my username and a password every time. This is interactive. You could use sort of, keep the credential in the cache of the browser. But essentially, it's just using the browser's cache to store that information. It's not storing it on your machine. So that runs into some problems. There is a new thing that has come out. It's called the Web Account Manager, that has been around. It's actually been on everyone's machine since about Windows 10, but it has not been in use or publicly documented for until fairly recently. Emmanuel can explain exactly when in the chat. Thank you. But the idea behind this is that your machine, you've already logged into it. You've put in a username and a password. You've done the MFA dance. You've done all the things. You've used Windows Hello for Business. If I go to authenticate and I need to run it as me, why do I need to put in another username and a password? Why do I need to create a service principal with a secret that I'm going to store in my code accidentally? Why do I need a certificate? If my identity is enough to do the work, can I please just use the identity on my computer? Very much like the thing that I just showed you in ADO. So the Web Account Manager broker solves that for us by essentially saying, yes, if you want to authenticate, I will simply get the account on your machine and I will authenticate on your behalf. I'll show a demo of that now. And then I'm going to show you a thing that I got working today while at Steve's house. Okay, so just again, we've got this, like 4 lines of code to do the thing. If I go over to authors fun, actually don't need this one, so close that. Okay, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. All the way to the top. So previously, we're just using Microsoft Identity Client.dll. We need a couple of other libraries to get this to work. Obviously, we're talking about a broker, so we need the broker library. And then we need the native interrupt library for other things to make this work. This is, because it's relatively new, it hasn't been merged into MCell. I'm not sure whether it ever will. We probably don't need to worry about how it all works, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So we're just going to select all of this stuff. Okay, again, same deal, client ID, tenant ID. The only thing of note, and this is the thing, if anyone's actually super interested in this and they want to get a screenshot, this is the redirect URI that you need to configure in app registration to get this working. You don't need to do anything special with your app reg. You just need to put this redirect in as a native redirect. So it is MS AppX Web Microsoft.AD.broker plugin, and then the app ID or the client ID of the app registration that you want. This is what the broker is sitting watching for. So, once we've got that set up, everything just works. We're going to select all the code here. We're just going to put this into memory, and then we're going to scroll down, and then we have our auth flow. So most of this is very similar to what I showed you. There's a couple of other things that we do here. We've got our broker options. We're essentially saying what version of the broker are we using. At the moment, Windows is the only thing that supports this, but this is a thing that will be coming out to Linux and Mac environments at some point. I have no actual ETA on that. I just know that it's being worked on. So we're just going to go ahead and put that in. And then we're also just in the public client application, we're going to set an identity to the operating system account. And this is so that when we try to get an authentication token, it's just going to tunnel through and see what's on our system and what's currently logged in. So we're not running this as system. This is just go find the logged in operating system account. So we're going to go ahead and select that. The rest of the stuff is fairly similar. We're creating exactly the same way. We've got the client ID. We've got our authority that I've written slightly different to be confusing, but it's the same deal. And then we have a tenant ID, and then the redirects, we're not using the default one. We're putting in our specific one. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in. We haven't built it yet because we do need to inject the broker because it's an extension module. So I just go ahead and say with the broker, and I just put this in. We then build it, not F9. That's not the right key. And then instead of doing acquire token interactive, we do acquire token silent. We select our scopes, our OS identity, which is the operating system, and then we're going to execute that and we're going to get a token. So let's just go ahead and press F8 on this. And that is done. And if I just go into authentication result, look at that. We have a token. So with this, I can then do this, shrink you down. Really exciting demo here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab information about who I am just to confirm that I actually have an auth token. Cool. So I just did a graph call against myself. My email address is ben@usedhousesalesman.com.au. I'm surprised I don't have a phone number in here.
You've got an email, that's good.
I do have an email, yeah. I'm
going to email you just.
gainfully employed. Thank you very much. But yeah, so conceptually,
Are you an adult on this tenant?
it's really hard to tell. I could probably check. Wait, thanks for nerd sniping me. I'm a member. He is adult. I can't find it. I'm sure I'm not. It is me after all. But so, again, this gets back to that point that a lot of times, even if you're not using MSAL, there's a type of authentication called ROPC, which allows you to just put in a username and a password, save that in a PowerShell script and run it. Most of the time, MFA will stop you from being that bad at your job, but sometimes it won't. And I've lost count of the amount of times that I've seen people's usernames and passwords stored in GitHub repos. So, this sort of solution saves you from yourself. What it does do is it introduces another problem that no one has brought up, but I'm going to bring it up myself. I've now created an app registration that anyone that has an account in my Entra environment can now run this and do things. How do we solve that? Well, you need to go into the enterprise application, and then you need to actually control and constrain who is allowed to authenticate with this app registration. So it makes it simpler, but it just changes the level of complexity. So you still need to do your job. This just stops you from accidentally leaking passwords. So it's Steve.
So the question I posit to you, Ben, would you recommend putting something like Defender for DevOps or Defender for Code across all of your tenants, or not tenants, your projects, your organizations, to check these known passwords?
I would suggest look at the pricing and make this. Because I did, and we deferred to use a third-party solution.
There is a 31-day free trial.
There
You
is.
can only enable it once per tenant at the Defender for Cloud level. You
Right,
have
so-
to do it at each component level.
Right, but the good news is that tenants are ephemeral, and we can simply just tear them down and rebuild them at any given time. So that's fine.
Yeah, because it's all code.
Every 31 days, just burn it down, start again. No, so yes, there are solutions out there that will allow you to scan your code. If it is in GitHub, there are free tools that literally will scan and say, hey, you've left a password, you idiot. But in ADO, there are solutions, they're just very expensive. So, you need to weigh up whether you come up with your own solutions to scan those things, or you pay the exorbitant pricing. But, this isn't a licensing user group.
Question, that only works on single tenant apps, right?
No,
So that works on a multi-tenant app?
Yes,
You can
correct.
request tokens for the tenants?
yes. So if I go up to this code, this with authority, if I go back to the auth is easy, just to make it like more obvious what we're doing here. With authority, it's just login.microsoft.online.com. So if you change that to common and your app registration allows multi-tenant auth, you can absolutely use this to go do things. Think very carefully about what you're doing. You're creating viruses, essentially, that allow you to do whatever without actually being stopped by passwords. So very, very careful. But yes, you can. You can technically do whatever you want here. I'm not saying,
Thinking production, I'm thinking dev environment and giving other people.
I bet you're thinking production.
Right away.
Okay, so this is cool. I don't expect anyone but myself and maybe Emmanuel to actually want to know how to do this from scratch. Most people just want a solution that authenticates, and that's why things like ngGraph and the AZ CLI tools and stuff exist, because if I just want to do things in Azure, then I say connect and it just gives me a token. Well, I don't even know. It just says, cool, you're connected. So there is a module that Emmanuel, who thankfully joined us because I don't think he's seen this yet. We were just over in Antwerp for PSConf, and it was great. And we both had authentication demos. And I'm sure his was better than mine, but I didn't watch it because I'm terrible. But I know that he writes some amazing modules, and he has this module called AZ Auth. And, I did my demo on Web Account Manager, and I went up to him and I'm just like, wouldn't it be cool if we could put this in? And he was like, yeah, just do the work. So I did the work on Sunday, and it didn't work at all. It was terrible. And Emmanuel sort of figured out some bugs in his pipelines. And today on Steve's couch, I got it working. So this has not been published yet, but it does work, I think. So let's just see into this. So I'm going to make this full screen so we can all see it. Again, remembering this only works on Windows. I know most of us are Windows people, so cool. Going to import module. All right, so we're going to go in to get AZ token. So this is the AZ Auth module, which is available right now on the PowerShell gallery. And this new feature that I'm showing you is not available yet. But it will be.
It's going to be that often. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I got to document it. I know. You'll
Get Copilot to do it for you.
go away. Okay. I'm going to do tenant ID. Does everyone know that it doesn't matter whether you use the tenant ID or the FQDN or the on Microsoft? Cool. So use house salesman.com.au. The client ID is, I think, one of these ones. Let's give it a go. F9 sounds good. Copy. And then with the power of magic, I'm going to select broker, and then we're just going to press enter. Now, note that when I did this previously, it didn't ask for credentials. It just gave me the token. So by default, the way that I've designed this is it will simply give you an option to display the available accounts on the machine. This window that we're looking at is a native window. This is not using your browser. This is using the broker on your machine to do authentication. So I am connected as Ben. So I'm going to.
But you want to be connected to multiple accounts if you register, right?
Yes, correct. And we were testing this with Steve's team, but there's some very cool conditional access policies on this tenant. And I barely work here, so I'm not even going to investigate that. But we can see here that I have a token, right? No one asked me for a password. It just works. I've got my scopes. I've got my claims. Everything is just going to work. So if I grab that token, add bearer to it, I can do my graphicals, I can do all the things I need to do. If you know that you don't need to check and select the user, I've added this handy dandy feature, which is use default account. Look how quick that came. It just works. This is stateful in that if you close the browser and redo this, you will get the same token because it is using the MSAL cache to store everything, and it handles the refresh token for you. You don't need to think about it. You just go, I would like a token, please. Now, one of the last thing I want to say is the reason why things like this are really important instead of just relying on mggraph or ACCLI tools is there is a known issue with PowerShell where if you have two different modules that are looking at two different versions of the same library, when you run the first thing, it will inject that or it will add that library to your session, do the work. And then if you go to run the other module that has an older version or a different version, that version will probably fail. This is just a thing that happens in PowerShell. Adding types or adding libraries is just a pain. So one of the big things that I keep saying whenever I talk about this is that if someone at Microsoft has the ability to elicit some change, what we should be doing with MSAL is creating a central sort of God module that just does auth, and then all of our other things that are created should just inherit or require that thing. This is standard for every other language that uses MSAL, so things like Python, JavaScript. They all just have a library that you can use. PowerShell is the only one that doesn't. Again, MSAL.ps was an unofficial module that did what I wanted it to do. I'm hoping that we can get this to close enough parity that it will be the module that everyone can use. But gosh, it'd be really, really nice if there was a first-party library written in PowerShell by Microsoft so that there was that extra level of trust that we weren't doing anything sketchy. But the code is obviously available on GitHub. Everyone can sort of analyze it and see what's going on. This will be in once I write documentation.
Not that fast. I was expecting by Friday.
A couple of years, maybe, one letter a day. But yeah, it works, and you can just keep doing it. So yeah, it's kind of neat. That's me.
That's awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
You need to have like microphones set up like at a conference.
Yeah.
Have people walk up.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was.
Yeah, but you don't repeat.
Yeah.
So are those WAM redirect URIs finally documented? Because I used to deal with all sorts of customers seeing them in AD event logs and freaking out. And
So the WAM redirects are documented. The whole WAM flow for C# it's great documentation. So absolutely, yeah.
Well, the other one I had was like, is that competing against default Azure credential and that sort of stuff, or is it like it's more for platform and Azure focused? But the silent makes sense.
Yeah, it's the sign off that makes me excited about it, really. That's kind of the only reason you want to do it, other than instead of relying on your browser cache for that sort of stuff, this just uses the broker. So the broker does all the work for you.
Like your platform plans too, like device.
Yeah.
So the status and sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I would like to look into is like, can I use device identity to get a token instead of user identity? So that's a
I have that for some of the first party APIs, but not for all.
Yeah.
There's some nice ones with management.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.
And extra thanks for doing it on a PC that wasn't yours against a tenant that's not yours,
Kiosk, Windows 11.
and not smashing
You need-
their
you-
laptop to pieces with
You
something.
need to prove that works on the end user computer as well, just not on yours.
Yeah. So anyone that wasn't at PSCon for you, there's a very stupid video of me doing a demo on a machine that I did not trust, showing off a way to connect in using SSH, using Azure Arc. And I was just like, I promise you this is simple. Watch what happens. And 10 people got up, set up a table tennis session and played round the world table tennis while I demoed this feature in front of like 300 people. So I'm getting a little bit better at chaos. But
The 5-minute one where you have to do it in 5 minutes.
yeah, it was very stupid. And then, you know, I still don't think I'm ready for Steve chaos yet, but getting there. Getting there.
How about if we put you in a room full of cats?
Oh, that'd be
You'd
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd be in your element.
nothing's going wrong there.
Okay, so moving into the next section. So this is really just something that some of you may have seen some of the comments on it or even participated in some of the things that have led to this, which is, I guess, like if we sort of had to put Intune into an age category, like it's beyond teenager now. So it's gone from toddler.
Sorry, I thought it was still in its teething
It's gone
process.
from toddler to infant to teenager.
Oh, it's in its alternative club scene.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's still untrustable.
Less angst.
So it's got if it was in Melbourne, it would have a top list of.
Yeah,
like,
it's going bang, it's going next. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I guess one of the things there is that so I don't want to use the term that it's not mature, because that just opens up a different can of worms. And because and basically it's a cloud service, so it's always going to be evolving. Things that we've done that have been the correct way of doing things for a long time don't necessarily break over time. But if somebody else came into your tenant, a tenant that you set up 5 or 10 years ago, and looked at the way you did things, they would criticize the hell out of you. But it's not that you're necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just that you're doing it very differently to the way they are.
It works, don't touch it.
Exactly. So, so basically in the life cycle of Intune as an MDM solution for Windows, it's already sort of gotten to that point that we're at with GPO, where people are like, yep, I'm sure you could streamline it. I'm sure you could optimize what we've got in our environment. But if you change one damn thing, you've lost your job. So I guess from here, what that sort of leads to then is some of the conversations that we've had, which is like, what are some of the different things that maybe you've learned over time, or things that you're still struggling with in terms of concepts where, what is the correct way of doing it? So yes, it used to be the early days of Intune, it was really easy. You couldn't do a lot, and the things you could do, you didn't have any choice as to how to do it. It's like, follow the bouncing ball, end of conversation.
But what if the bouncing ball goes this way? Follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah, and the bouncing ball is actually on a guided rail. Yeah, so yeah. So if we take a look at some of the things that I've sort of thrown in here are some of the things that I think that like we've covered in some degree, either as kind of like throwaway comments that have turned into discussions, or at some recent events. These are things. So, and it was even at the end of Workplace Ninjas in Melbourne a few weeks back. This was one of that second one around, well, there are so many places now where you could potentially put the same setting in, like what is the right place to do it? And I guess the best correct answer I can give you is in a single location.
Yeah.
That, as a starting point, that's the best response. But from there, if someone goes, well, what is the best location? It's like, where have you got it today? Now, there are some things that I think we can, if you sort of look at this, I'm sure everyone's got a few examples of where they've probably had to make some decisions around some of these things. So what I was sort of thinking is that for each month of this, Aliyah, for the user group, is like having a major topic, but then having something like this for when we've got a major topic that's not a full, not going to take up a full, like I'm sure Ben could easily go for 2 hours if we were the right audience.
What am I doing?
No, you don't do anything. You've done what you
Okay,
needed to.
excellent.
Keep
dance.
um,
Well, that's
so, and I guess this also ties into one of the conversations I had with Stephen, which was around, yeah, we did, where, you were sort of talking about why you were getting hassled about why you're putting in session nominations around kind of like the basics of Intune.
Yes.
And Stephen's response, which is something that is a accurate response, is because people need them. And this is something where it's not just Intune. I think it's pretty much any technology that's been out there for a while that's gotten bigger and more complex. People get thrown into it, and there's an expectation that you just know how it works. It's like, oh, you've used an iPhone, therefore you must know how MDM works.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an accurate. Oh, you've seen a computer. Okay, so with these, I guess, so some of it is really, sharing of best practices, but also for those of you who maybe, haven't had broad Intune exposure, also being steered in the right direction early on, not sort of say, bad things about the way things were done in the past. Now, there could be some examples where you've had to put together some pretty horrific workarounds. So
it's literally my job.
Which, and probably, and one of the ones on here that I've got is, some of the things that people had to do with PowerShell and probably still are doing with PowerShell inside of Intune, or via, not inside of Intune, but via Intune.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that's there, it's like, why are you doing it that way? Or that was the only way that was available. And it's like, well, it's been in settings catalog now for 3 years, but it wasn't there 3 years and 1 month ago when you checked for it.
I think one of the big things that, back when I was actually rolling chaos things out, because my good friend Steve was promising that we could do it before it was properly ready, was that, the big thing that when we were handing it over to people, we were saying, well, what we've done is a stopgap because this will be introduced eventually. Like, it got to a certain point where I was sort of saying, anything that we do will be officially supported. So please, in 6 months' time, review your environments and understand that, things will be modernized and improved. So, doing the kludgy PowerShell solutions for this sort of stuff is absolutely fine, as long as you don't, give it a name and love it forever, because you will delete it and you will use the correct OMA URI or the security policies or whatever. So, that's my big thing. Like, make it good, but don't over-engineer the solution, because you will throw it away eventually.
It's the old adage of what I'm putting in today, I'm ripping out in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
All that.
So even like if I go back into some of my, like one of the old demo tenants that I've got for this, the PowerShell examples I've got in there, I was about to swear. There's something horrible. But the two PowerShell scripts that I put in there, because it was things that people kept asking, can you do this thing? One of them was mapping a network drive.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Guess what the IP address was of the network drive that I mapped?
192.168.
127.0.0. I also used PowerShell to add a printer. Guess what the printing device I added?
127.0.0.1.
No, it's not an IP address. It's a type of printer,
LPT1.
not a port.
Generic
It's,
type.
it's a printer type that you can output to.
Each,
I'm trying to be
XPS writer.
correct. I didn't think anyone would get that.
yes.
Yeah. Just because they were quick and dirty things where people were going, can you do this? Can you do that? It's like, and doing something where it's like, there's no, like doing it in a way that there was no dependency that it would break because of, the different network that you were on or whatever. So there's like, and I would say compared to some of the PowerShell scripts that are probably floating around in some tenants, I'd say they're probably examples of good things you could have done, even though I'm sort of classifying them as absolutely terrible.
Oh, we can very much attest to some of the stuff that we put in early days at least one customer where they're still using it at the moment.
We don't talk about that.
Before Bin32 apps existed, you had to deploy apps using PowerShell.
Yeah.
Or MS
No.
No. So if it was a complex, yeah, triggered hard. So if it was a complex installer that had multiple nested MSIs,
With an executable starter.
what would happen is the Intune management agent would sit there and watch the first thread. And once that dropped off, it would go, that's fine, and start its detection method, even though it's still installing. So
because it will expand multiple processes.
correct. So it would not look
but
at
you
the
could-
entire chain.
Let's say you could MSI a PowerShell script.
Wasn't fun though.
It did no. So the solution that we came up with back in the day was that we would have our complex solution and we would store that in a storage account and we would deploy a PowerShell script to simply download the payload and then install it, and then we would monitor it because we essentially built a better monitoring solution
Yeah,
for
because
complex threads.
if you're using, you can't have multiple MSIs spawning on if they don't know about each other. So the issue is if you wrap an executable that then goes off and spawns off an MSI, you either have to go, I'm always going to assume it was successful, or I've got to put some sort of control in place back later on to check, see if it was.
But this is the days of Silverlight Intune. So.
No,
Bloody, this wasn't that long ago.
this was still using the
Meditation test, I started working into almost same time as in 2018 when they had the support to InterISU, right?
Never used Silverlight, but
So it's at least 6 years old.
So you don't have that much problem.
no, not that much. I've seen screenshots. But look, I saw XP in someone's Windows Intune tenancy. I'm like, that's just
The biggest hurdle that Steve had to overcome was convincing me that new Intune was worth spending any time on.
Yep.
Because I'd seen the Silverlight portal and I'm like, no.
Like we
I'd rather do
have
anything
one
else.
customer said of policy dating 2016.
Oh, we've got, so here's the thing. If you had a Silverlight tenant and it converted to Graph and you still have policies for compliance or basic device configuration that are still Windows 8.1 or later, get rid of the compliance policies
I know.
because they actually don't work properly on Windows 11, but they still apply. And the device configuration ones, unless it's like the crazy templates like Wi-Fi, VPN certificates.
Yeah.
Go and review them and actually make sure that they are doing what you want them to do, because there's been innovations since then.
Yeah, I think just on sort of, going sort of back to the main thread of what we were talking about here, there is this idea that is still pervasive that once you set up config manager, Intune, whatever management environment that you have, once you spend 6 months getting it right, you can like lock the key and never change it. That is not correct. This is an ongoing thing. This is a full-time job. This is a thing that you can either be passionate about or you can do and then quit. It's just a fairly common thing. But, like things will change and things will improve. So you need to constantly be reviewing the state of your environment and making decisions about whether the work that you've invested time in needs to be updated. And if you do not have business buy-in to change or review the settings every 3 to 6 months, figure out a way to get that approval, because this is critical. Because I'm looking at the other topics up here, dynamic groups versus device filters. Filters are a relatively new thing. People had built insane dynamic group solutions or built their own dynamic group solutions only to realize that filtering is pretty good. And then you have to scrap everything you've done and then redo it. It's not a waste of your time. It just is a thing that is newer and better. So, you just need to realize that everything that you do will probably be replaced with something better. But it's just a skills thing, right? It's moving.
Also, it's like awareness though as well of what is new and a replacement, or what is just new and a different way of doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the old way being different?
Right. And you can compare the two and go, well, I don't really need to change it because it's not providing any functionality. But filtering is a fantastic example. But dynamic groups don't work.
Yes, I do.
They don't.
Depends the size of your tenant.
Okay. All right. Let me rephrase that. The first time you create a dynamic group, it works fantastic. Then if you want to change it, it doesn't. So filters solve that problem, right? So like that's the sort of thing that like it's not even an argument. You just change things to filters. It's fantastic.
So Sven, question around the custom OMA URIs don't have a clickability check on them. They do, but not all of them do. That's the complicating factor. So they all should report back pass fail, but some of them just report back pass.
Well, some of them always report fail because they don't have a get method.
Yes. So
Yeah, the problem with the custom OMA URIs is you're essentially creating a standardized abstraction layer over the top of a lot of very complex policies and processes that sit on Windows machines to do the thing that you need to do. And there's hundreds of different departments that are building their own little tool that like trying to orchestrate and standardize that across such a large environment is difficult. And that is why you will be having these pain points forever.
the newer ones are a lot more stable, we'll say.
The problem is in Intune, though, you can't use device builders and everything. Let's say you do have a PowerShell script, it needs to be a group. And then it's kind of like, do I have most things using filters, but not this one thing? Or do I just use groups for consistency?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
I mean, that all speaks to then also the problem with like
Haresh.
Go for it, buddy.
The most common overlap I've seen is around the security configuration, the built-in ones, and the settings catalog. I think that's like the pain point, and it just depends on the order in which you've done things. Like, for example, if you've done the security setting as a starter, and you've done that as the step one versus creating other settings in the catalog. And I would say the most amount of common conflicts, even in my own test tenant, has been that because I went about creating settings catalog policies first, and then the out-of-the-box security settings was an afterthought once things were much matured and like, it was so robust that you just enable it over there, and then you don't need a dozen of settings underneath. And when you do that, there's so much of conflicting or conflicts that take place, which then you have to unwind your own settings one by one, which you've done it manually or whatever, whichever method, doesn't matter, at some point in time. I think that's one of the biggest pain point I've seen across the fleet, and just depends on the priority in which things are done.
Yep.
So Mark, which topic we're going to pick to discuss today?
So I guess then, if there's something that we can sort of cover quickly for tonight, and I know that that's a big ask, but actually let's. But I guess then, so things like some of the others we can sort of leave for when we've got more time. But probably the one, and seeing that I think Sven dropped a question in it anyway, which is about why doesn't, or not necessarily everything, but why aren't let's focus on device filters.
So was the question why not all workloads support device filters, or why device filters lack some?
Why it's not consistent across Intune supporting it? And the answer to that, the official answer is because it's hard. And because things weren't built with it in mind.
Yeah. And I think the official answer is probably going to have a lot of different teams involved on each workload, and they're going to have their priorities. And say adding support to filters might not be something.
Yeah, I would say that so every single pane of glass that you look at in Intune is not created by one team. Maybe the front end is, but the back end is not. So getting this standardized filtering solution put into every single thing is a process that takes time, and humans are involved, so it takes longer. It's just one of those things where if you have the ability to create support tickets and demand satisfaction that way, do it. It's kind of there, make people know that this is what you want at the end of the day,
And probably just the thing to add to that, because I've seen this kind of I'm not sort of saying this is the feedback Sven's making, but sometimes you just see comments like, why don't they just make it happen? And It's really easy to get angry at people on the internet because a lot of people on the internet deserve it. But it's like, like if it, it's like if it was easy or fast, they would have done it. Idiot.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And in a lot of cases, then you'll have people saying, well, why don't they throw more resources at it? And it's like, because there's only one person who might know how the code that's making that thing works.
And his name is Paul, and he's on holidays.
Oh, he doesn't. And he didn't document anything.
His name's
So I think that I learned, and I think probably Ben that's working on software companies learning is a lot of this stuff comes down to effort and cost. You say, look, we need to have something to deploy resource to Intune. Are we going to create the same collection stuff? Or we're going to reuse Azure AD identities or groups that are already in there? Okay, we're going to use dynamic ones. We could create a filters, but that's going to cost us $20 million and it's going to be a six years work. Let's go with that first. Then we start implementing the other one. Yeah, it's all about that. Like it's cost and effort and estimate.
It is, but also it's cost, effort, and also demand. Like to bring it back to where I work, which sponsored pizza and beer, and you would all be having it if you were here. We have a way for like our customers to request ideas. It's our ideas portal. And whenever anyone asks, "Oh, why isn't this feature in?" I say, "Well, we have an ideas portal." And they go, "Yeah, I put it in, but I didn't really get that feedback." I'm like, "That's one way that you can game the system, and you can just keep voting for it over and over and over again." People have figured that out, and you know what? It works.
That's why they call it user voice, because it's just one user.
Yeah, exactly. But like, hey, if we get 500 votes on a thing in a day, we're like, okay, well, we're going to pay attention to it. So sometimes being annoying and noisy is good. Just make it positive. Don't complain about things. Be very energetically optimistic that it will get fixed if you have the right attitude.
Are any of you using device filters in your conditional access policies? So there are. So
I've used to exclude specific device for specific needs. That's it.
Yes. So it's So it's one of those things that. I kind of laugh at this one a little bit because it's like, hang on, I can't get it here in Intune, but here it is popping up over on the Entra portal instead. But it's So there are. So there are places. Basically, for things like conditional access policies, if you were using, dynamic device groups, for example, then that would be something where I'd really consider using. This would be a definite situation where I'd want to use device filters instead if they met the requirement.
So, quick question, Mark. The device filters on conditional access, they are Entra ID filters. They're not Intune filters, are they?
They're filtered on the Entra ID object, not
not on the Intune.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're in the graph. They're filtering on device. They're not filtering on managed device.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
and that's the same for all filters, right? Or no? Okay.
It's been Intune ones and managed ones.
The Intune ones.
Right. Yeah, it's been a minute since I played around with it.
Okay, but I guess then just seeing that, rather than sort of covering other topics, just like other things, then just in terms of if anyone sort of hasn't spoken up, but they're wondering, why the hate on dynamic groups. It's the official support statement on it is that your tenant will update its dynamic groups at least once per 24 hours. Once per 24 hours or potentially more. If you've got a really big tenant, you're going to get one every 24 hours.
Yeah.
If you've got a much smaller tenant, you'll probably get more than that.
And isn't the minimum like once every 8 hours after the initial deployment?
Once every 24 hours.
The SLA is once every 24
Oh
hours.
yeah, but SLAs are much like best practices.
So if you've got a teeny tiny tenant or you have really efficient dynamic groups rules, it will typically run about once an hour.
Yeah, right.
What's a small, large tenant? Like, what are the?
That's what I was about to say. I have heard on conferences that people start facing more issues over 40,000.
Yeah, see, therefore, like I'm 500.
Yeah,
I got
500,000.
Yeah, no.
I think no. So the thing that we need to remember as Australia is our idea of a big company
Yeah.
is like a couple of hundred people. Just like, yeah, calm down.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can say, but I heard from people saying, look, we start facing issues when we reach 40,000 objects.
It depends.
Yeah.
But again, might be.
It depends also on the number of dynamic groups you have in your environment. So if you're going and building or hundreds or thousands of dynamic groups, then that's going to impact it, right?
Mhm.
If you've got a lot of, we'll call it active Entra ID chatter, so you're doing a lot of auth and a lot of things like that, that can potentially impact it as well. Because realistically, if we break it down, there'll be a finite number of resources that are allocated to your tenant, and those finite resources will be allocated to dynamic group updates, authentication processing, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's also worth pointing out that that finite thing that's allocated to your tenant is a pool of everyone using Intune.
Yes.
So when you start doing silly things, you can start impacting other people's experience.
Scale units.
Yes, in region.
Yeah.
So we had like one of the best sessions I ever said was with Mecco explaining the infrastructure behind Intune and the scale units and stuff. Was just like, that's what I told Steve, like back to the basic session. I think someone commented, why does you pushing a policy to Intune might take 8 hours?
Yeah.
Why you create an Entra ID group and you add an object and you push the policy and I said sync and did not sync. They need to start understanding about PTR tokens, and because you device or user does not know is a member of a new group, like explaining that stuff, it makes so much sense. You're going to say, okay, cool. Now I know there's a reasonable explanation why these things takes time. And it's not because it's slow. It's not SCCM.
Yeah.
SCCM, Microsoft doesn't care. It's you're paying for the process. You're paying for the SQL. It's your problem if you, and now we're talking about like a global thing that it needs to take care of all your needs in another 150 million devices.
I may or may not have a T-shirt that says "I broke Intune, ask me how." So just it's a thing that you can with the right attitude, you can get it.
It's the second one
that you don't want.
I imagine you'd also have tenants that are like quite small and say their like units are allocated or maybe pretty low compared to the volume they might try and use as well. So I imagine people shoot themselves in the foot by trying to do too much.
Maybe a bit off the Intune side. For the dynamic groups, does it matter how many total objects in a tenant versus in the groups themselves?
Yes.
Because it has to first scans.
So, but
Sorry.
more importantly,
Microsoft or a Power BI blacklist.
Someone messed up the AAD Connect filter, and it happens.
yeah.
Because if you think about what it's actually doing against most tenants, like in your mind, you're thinking like if I'm sort of querying directly against the identity system, that's something where I'll see the result in less than a second. Everything's going to be up on screen. But it's like, no, that's not how it works here. Yeah. It's not your system. It's a shared environment. Good old time slicing.
Yeah.
So so some of those things where it's what do we call it? Cloud speed or cloud
So-
hours, cloud o'clock.
One of the things that we changed in November last year with dynamic groups that helps a lot is the efficiency of queries. We removed, I believe it was the option for any.
We dropped it anyway because it's just too
Yeah. So if you went and looked at like the old school query that we created for autopilot devices, the any ZTI, that was actually really inefficient. So that control got actually removed from dynamic groups, and now we found people that were running for hours to update a dynamic group, it was down 2 minutes or seconds.
So auto patch used to use those queries.
I believe so. I can't remember.
So that's the guy we can blame for them removing.
Yeah.
So how do
I can always blame Steve for everything.
It's actually been a while since I've made one of those groups, but how do you access that array to get an item out of it?
it contains and starts with?
Right, okay.
You can use regex on that. A lot of people don't know that you can use regex on that. So
Yeah.
But yeah, we documented it at the time, but it basically you change from any to contains and starts with because it's way more efficient.
And then again, it was the reason why that thing took longer and longer is because more people using that, it costs the whole to a scale unit. So you're affecting everyone in that region, not just your tenant.
Yeah.
The bigger your tenant is, the more costly are the queries and it's more slowing everyone.
Can we blame Michael Millhouse? Because I'm sure I got the rule from his website.
Oh, there was on Microsoft official documentation. The problem is, it was on Microsoft official documentation to use that. That's the guidance
It
they
goes
give
back
for
to
you.
the topic here that it started out as any, and that was on the official docs.
Yeah.
And then it became contained to start with, but how many people went and updated their group?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because why would you? It worked initially.
Awareness is the biggest thing. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, to even go and look, but maybe you don't even know to look for something new.
Yeah, exactly. And
You only look when you need to do it. Yeah.
right, and this comes down to like, user groups are fantastic for sharing that knowledge. How many people work in IT who work in tech don't go, oh, you
You
really?
work in tech?
Apparently.
They let you touch computers? Anyway,
It's right here.
It's a maximum.
yeah, it doesn't count.
It's one of the ones from Toys R Us.
So it doesn't count.
It's,
You can't use Docker on it, so it's fine.
It's even harder than this land, you want to make all these changes to something that's already working on a, fixed rate customer? No.
Oh, yeah. No.
Yeah.
So,
But sort of what I'm getting at is like, we can talk about, oh, there's these new implementations and we can figure it out and we can implement them. Cool. But there's so many other people out there that don't, right? So, I mean, you can look at it as a negative thing, or those who are in consulting can look at it with dollar signs.
Still.
That would be like a really good session, like all these things, like small things that you should check on your tenant that how
We call it best practice.
yes.
Well, I'd be very careful of that. I'd call it better than you currently have practiced.
Let me show you how to improve your.
Improving efficiency on scale units.
what do you call a tenant when they've got a Google Chrome MSI that got updated in 2021?
Attach my PC custom.
Yeah, that should be.
That's the app auto update. I don't see the problem. That's another kind of.
That's import ADMX. I don't know, it's native. No, that one you still need to import.
You still need to import.
Like I very proudly have a very old version of the unified labeling client that gets pushed out. But I do that so that I can then jump over to Windows Update on the client.
Yeah.
And it says, look what I found, an updated version of this thing that you just pushed to me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But all of this is kind of funny. It comes back to like, well, one thing we do at work is everything's in like infrastructure as code, very AWS, very like all DevOps stuff. And trying to do that with Intune now with Graph is relatively impossible. Like it's possible, but it's really difficult to understand.
That's what it looks.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, but then I thought up until you guys talking about OMA URIs, that maybe those are like a base layer version of truth, maybe for all policies and everything else is maybe, So then maybe that's the way you approach it, right? It's like
To a point.
exactly, but that's the
So-
tough part for us.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things just to flag is that literally anything that you do in Intune is backed by a graph call.
Of course.
So like the takeaway is be good at graph and you can like literally never be
Be good at the-
deployed.
But be good at the beta graph because everything in
Oh, everything is beta, sorry,
Everything
I
is
forgot to
beta.
say.
Beta is production. We just move on from that.
But
I-
it's
Back in when I was doing consultancy work and the customers would be like, we cannot let you use beta in our production environment." I'm like, then you can't use Intune.
yeah, exactly.
Use Enter ID.
Yeah, no, you can't at all. So like the solution was I would sit them down with the one person who was making the most noise and I'd be like, okay, press F12. We're going to click on some links.
Dude, yeah.
Watch what happens. And they're like, oh, we can't use this. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Close the dev tools then.
Exactly. So, yeah.
We used to use AGPM for GPOs and like trying to convince people to move off. They're like, but what's the native like replacement? I'm like, what native replacement?
ADO.
Well, yeah, so we use ADO server.
Yeah.
We're moving to like
Cloud one.
Yes. But the thing is, it's used by like.
Shut up.
Well, no, yeah. So I mean, like, it's a long way off, and like the infra team doesn't really do that as much. Like, we have a whole DevOps department for apps and in-house and stuff, but it's all GUI. I'm like the only one who knows. Me and my colleague here, who couldn't make it tonight, we're like the only ones who like have done it a bit more.
Yep.
And then the rest of the global team it's all new to them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an easy conversation to have to explain that, like if we're working in a DevOps environment, which we probably all are, even if most people think they're not, they are, because IS, like infrastructure is code, anything is code, management is code. It's all as code. That's what DevOps primarily does. If you are clicking on a thing, you cannot automate that. You are slowing things down.
Yeah.
That is the literal pitch to say we're going to start doing, all of these things are going to be done in pipelines. Whether that's on-prem or not, it kind of doesn't matter. It all does the same thing.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
The only downside for it being on-premise, you have to manage the infrastructure yourself, which sucks. But
On-prem being like an AWS EC2, but that's
it's like whatever.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The argument that like, oh, we don't need to learn this because we already know how to click on the button. That's not how things scale.
Okay, so question for everyone in chat. From this list or something closely related to it, just sort of drop in what out of these ones, which one would be probably the highest priority for you if you want us to like do something like this next month. Which of these or something similar where it's more of a, one approach versus another? Just sort of drop something into chat just so we can get a bit of a feel for what might be good as part of next month's content. It doesn't mean we'll completely ignore the others. We can probably, I think this is a list that we can continue to grow on a fairly regular basis.
Third one, native Intune M365 apps.
Third one, native Intune M365 apps delivery versus other deployments. I don't know what the best way is. Anyone still having problems with the deploying Office through Intune natively? Is it still it's still an issue?
For years.
I've heard a bunch of people asking me why we do native. I said because no one could prove to me that CDN would fail often enough that I could just.
So the
I
only
did forget to rotate the cert the other week.
listen, we're all human. We all stuff up.
It happens.
No, I just
So that would have affected it.
That would affect them.
Unless you'd already packaged it.
Yeah.
The time
into
deal was
WinFile
also
and dropped it in.
Yeah. I think the amount of effort to sort of maintain like an Office 365 deployment, it's aggressively outweighs the simplicity and ease of use of the standard one. The only time I ever ran into issues was in initial deployments of, 400 or 500 devices. Rapidly in a day, you would start getting some bandwidth throttling issues and things would slow down a little bit. But once your environment's relatively you're already using Intune, your device is already there. There really is very little argument to say, well, I need to look after it myself.
You always probably set up.
But yeah, they moved with the OCDM now, so you hope it'd be fine.
Yoink.
I typically use Win32 actually, and I've got a lot of clients that do have like Excel plugins and things like that, and I need to ensure an installation order. So the dependency of a Win32 makes sense. The other thing I've had as well is if you make a change to that Office 365 apps package, it will try to reinstall that on every single workstation in the tenant.
Yeah.
And it never wins because there's always Word or Excel or Office open.
Don't make changes.
Well, there's 2 points that I put there.
So it's okay. So we'll say that this will be a topic, a bigger topic for next month.
Yes,
we
but
can talk about it now.
Say what you're going to say, but
it sounds like this is something that is worth digging into.
For your edge extensions, go and look in admin.microsoft.com and see if the extensions exist in there that you can go and deploy them straight from the store. Because that
Some very nice vendors do, some very not so nice vendors don't.
listen, all vendors are great.
Your vendor is great.
Oh. Hey, one beer and you and some pizza. Yeah.
That's an efficient beer too.
I mean, to be fair, it's like a 9% beer.
Yeah.
100%.
No, 9%, not 100%.
Oh, that's why you got the beer.
See, that's why I shouldn't have had
Have you met Yup before?
Yeah.
He met Yup.
I met Yup. I got Yup.
Yup took him out all day.
You got Yup.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic for next month.
Do you know if
Is it,
WinGet's going to be packaged as the latest version in 24H2? Is that a thing? No?
What was the question?
Yeah, WinGet's like super out of date when you first get 23H2 or Windows 11.
We passed that yet, haven't we? So I've got a process that calls Apex provision package. and-
Yeah, I'm putting that in now task sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But where do you check?
To type what?
Where do you check to see what version of WinGet do you have?
We can get -B or something like that.
Yeah, double dash
It's
version.
like version 1.2. or
Yeah,
something
and
that
it
comes out
it
the
can't
box.
update itself. So like you are in a loop.
It doesn't
where-
have a bootstrap update.
No, so you install it and then you can't get the installer.
So there's a PowerShell module that will update it, but the PowerShell module has deliberate throws, so it doesn't run the system.
What's the latest?
1.8 to yeah,
And what are we stuck on?
1.2 when it's deployed.
It's-
It hurts.
Someone is nodding.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, it's fun.
Can you stop the recording so Steve cannot freely?
Okay, so with that, let me switch to the next slide, which is the general discussion. So this is where we do actually stop the recording anyway, and it is pretty close to 7:30. So let's stop the recording, but we'll keep talking just in case there are things said that people later regret, because I'm not going to go back and edit video.
Swearing commences in.
Now you can all